Hey everybody, it's Jim here. Like many of you, I love modifying my own guitars and doing the work myself. It's something that I really enjoy. I find a lot of fulfillment doing it. Plus, it's a cool way to experiment and get new sounds out of an instrument that you might want to improve or just kind of mess with a little bit. Not all those modifications are necessary though. Today, I'm going to be talking about one modification I do on Stratocasters that I consider a must-do mod, at least for me and for my own personal tastes. It's the Callaham vintage style bridge. So in today's video, I'm just going to be explaining why I love this bridge so much and really feel like it is worth every single penny that it costs, as well as installing it and giving you a few quick tips on installing it if you're going to be doing it yourself on the Corey Wong Daphne Blue Stratocaster. To begin with though, I started with this one in the Callaham bridge. This is an old 1982 JV Stratocaster that originally came with this bridge on it. This is actually Fullerton made USA spec, and it's by no means a cheap bridge, and there's many people that will swear by this unit. For years, decades really, of using this guitar, I found myself a little reluctant to hammer on this thing because the stability of it wasn't always the best, and really one of the bigger reasons is because I found myself bending the arms a little bit from time to time. I think that unit has gone through 3 to 4 different arms within its lifespan. Starting off by looking at the Fender block here, you're gonna see that this thing is threaded pretty much all the way up and down, and you can understand when you have the thing really tight in there. First of all, there's not the most play in the whole world, but if you were to really push down hard on this, abuse it, use heavy gauge strings, it's something that in my case and in the case of many other people will cause the arm to bend a little bit where it's threaded, and that's not cool because then you're gonna have to go off and replace it. But even worse, luckily this has never happened to me, but I know other people that this has happened to, the arm will break off, and then you'll have the fun of trying to get the remnants outside of the actual block itself or replacing the block. Both of those scenarios suck. Now, if we look at the Callaham block, you can see it's a bit different. It's the little details that really make a difference. This has the virtual pop-in arm that's only going to thread into that one little section that is meant to have the threading in it, and then that's it. It stops from there. That means that these are going to be almost impossible to break. Very rarely are you going to read on internet forums or see videos people complaining that they've broken the arm on their Callaham Strat bridge, and it's something that for my peace of mind I really do factor that in, and it's worthwhile to me just for that aspect alone. Ever since I installed the Callaham, the difference in feel was night and day compared to any of the Fender units that I've ever tried in the past, and that's before we even get into the pivot points of the actual screws here that really help with the tuning stability of it. And the second reason why I do love it is just that, the tuning stability, and it all has to do with right here. This is a really subtle difference, but again, it's the small details that go into engineering a high quality product that separate it from other products out there. This one is the Fender bridge. Again, this is the old Fullerton one. You can see that all the screw holes right here are above where the actual bridge starts to slant itself, the bridge plate right there. Looking at the Callaham one, you'll be seeing on the screen, the slant begins inside of the actual holes themselves, and what that does is it prevents another point of friction. And the final thing I want to highlight is the block itself. The block on this is cold rolled steel. Compared to a lot of import guitars, they're gonna have a zinc block on them, and the Fender American spec ones, they also come with steel. They're just not made in the same way, and I appreciate the fact that Callaham goes the extra mile to make sure it's cold rolled, and they CNC all the stuff themselves in-house to make sure it's all up to spec. So right now, what we're going to do is, I've talked about this thing enough, we're going to show an installation of it into the Corey Wong Strat. First, I'm going to go over all the tools that we're going to be using today. There aren't many. Screwdriver, we're going to be using 2 different size heads on it. One is going to be fit to remove the 6 screws holding in the bridge itself, and another one we're going to be using to loosen the claws on the back here so that we'll be able to get the springs. This is not removed. I'll also have to use the little screwdriver to remove this back plate to do so. Outside of that, standard stuff. We got our clippers here to remove the old strings because these are locking tuners. I cannot reuse these strings. Peg winder always makes your life a lot easier. And then in between, I will polish the frets and I will oil the fingerboard. I'll be using the F1 oil for that and the fretilyzer for polishing the frets themselves. So first thing we got to do though is remove the strings. So let's get to that. Okay, so this is the most critical part of the setup here, and that is how tight the screws are going to be. The method I like to use is, I don't want this bridge to float, but once I feel it start to go up, yep, see that? See how it raised up like that? Once the bridge raises up like that, that's too tight. So I do the same thing here. Now watch. See how it raised up? Loosen it, tighten just ever so slightly. Nope, see it's up, down. That right there is the key to having a stable setup if you want to use this in a non-floating, so basically it's only going to go down. And yeah, for me, I'm not a big fan of the floating. It's really inconsistent unless you absolutely nail it. And honestly, if I'm trying to get that crazy, I'll just use a Jazzmaster or a Jaguar. Now let's get the springs back in and we'll finish this up. As far as what we have to do next for the actual setup, and then to make sure that we're going to have really good tuning stability, you want to make sure that your heights are set to a place that you're happy with. In this specific video on the saddle heights, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Believe it or not, this actually came off of another Corey Wong Stratocaster that has the exact same radius to it. It's a compound radius, and this is pretty much dialed in really well in the brief second that I just sat and strummed it. So not going to spend a whole ton of time there, and the relief is really similar in the neck. But I do want to talk about the arm. But before we do that, 2 things that you should always remember to do with any vibrato system: lubricate the nut. Whether you use graphite, whether you use Vaseline, whether you use chapstick, or you use Big Ben's nut sauce or pencil shavings, it doesn't really matter. You want to make sure that it's lubricated. If it's a binding nut or you have any other problems up here, you're not going to have success once you start using the bar, and potentially even in general. So make sure that you take time to do that. And then one thing that we haven't done yet, but we will do before we're all done, is stretch the strings out. Back to the bar. Had a lot of questions about getting the bar to feel less stiff. Let's see what kind of shape this thing is in right now. Alright, I'm just kind of weird. I've done so many Strat setups, and I just did one for this guitar. This already feels like great. Well, it's not tuned. As we said, this was just to relative pitch. However, despite the fact that I'm happy with mine, what you're going to want to do is, if it's too tight for you and you feel like you have to use too much force to get the arm to work, I would recommend loosening the strings and then taking the screwdriver and loosening these screws just ever so slightly. Go in increments, retune up to pitch, and then try it again. If it's really stiff, maybe you can go a little bit more, like 2 turns or something like that. But in general, you don't want to do anything too extreme, and it's important to remember you do need some tension on this block from the actual claw and the springs that connect it provide it. So if you just went all out and you made it as loose as possible, that also will lead to not exactly the most stable of experiences. But as a whole here, honestly, this is a really straightforward job. That's all she wrote, easy peasy. Just don't forget to stretch out your strings, and when you are intonating the guitar, intonate it in a playing position. But I've stretched them a little bit here, and I'm kind of forcing it. Normally I would stretch it 1 or 2 more times, but I do want to test out how this thing feels now with the new bridge on it, and what better way than to just make some noise and hammer on the actual arm itself and see how it does. Perfect. That's it for today. If you found this useful, helpful, and or entertaining, feel free to let me know by hitting a like on the video, subscribing to the channel, and also sharing your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments section. If you don't use the Callaham bridge, let me know which one you prefer on your Stratocasters. But that's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy, everybody.